Hello and welcome. You're watching the Newstrack. I'm Rahul. Kanwal. Gautam Adani becoming India Today's Newsmaker of the Year. That's my top focus on the Newstrack. This is also the first ever interview for television, for magazine, for digital by Gautam Adani. Coming up on the Newstrack.
2022's biggest news interview.
These rankings and numbers do not matter to me.
All of India tuned in for this.
We have built a business model where we start a business from scratch, make it profitable, and then go public.
India's richest man up close.
Queuing up has never been a part of Adani's culture.
Adani on India Today trends big.
Prime Minister Modi ji has provided a visionary and an inspirational leadership to India.
Newsmaker of the Year 2022.
Gautam Adani is a product of a democratic India.
Gautam Adani, world exclusive.
What I want to do first is show you some excerpts from the Gautam Adani interview which have been trending heavily on television, on social, digital. People talking a lot about what Gautam Adani told India Today. I'll have Raj Chengappa, who did that interview for India Today. We'll have the Business Today editors joining us as well, plus an author of a book on Gautam Adani. We'll look specifically at some of the key things he said and look at the road ahead for Gautam Adani and for the Adani Group as Gautam Adani makes it to India Today's list of Newsmaker of the Year.
Now, apart from being the richest Indian and the richest Asian, you're also the world's third richest person. How does it feel to be wealthy? What does money mean to you?
See, Rajbhai, these rankings and numbers do not matter to me. These are only media hype. I'm a first generation entrepreneur who had to build everything from scratch. I get my thrills from handling challenges, and the bigger they are, the happier I am. For me, the opportunity and ability to make a difference in the lives of people and contribute to the growth and building of the nation is far more satisfying and important than being on some wealth ranking or a valuation list. I'm thankful to God that He has given me a great opportunity to serve the nation through infrastructure building.
Now, you talked of happiness. Can you add a little bit? Can you define what really makes you happy?
Personally speaking, this was the biggest year of my life. This year, I celebrated my 60th birthday. This personal milestone apart, on this occasion, my family committed rupees 60,000 crores to the Adani Foundations to support mainly three social causes which is close to my heart: education, healthcare, and skill development, which are foundational for any nation. This has given me immense satisfactions and happiness, which no professional achievement can ever give.
So, Gautam, bhai, let's explore this further. What motivates you when you do business or in life itself?
As an ordinary man, the courage, strength, resilience, and tenacity of the average Indians are very inspiring and motivating for me.
Now, switching topics a bit and coming more to looking at ahead and the reality, what is the state of the Indian economy and how do you see India's growth in the year ahead?
In our 75 years of independence, it took us 58 years to get to our first $1 trillion of GDP. 12 years to get to the next trillion, and just 5 years for the third trillion. But now, if you look at our pace of social and economic reforms, I see India adding $1 trillion to its GDP every 12 to 18 months within the next decade. I'm very optimistic about the growth and the prosperity of India. This optimism comes from the fact that in 2050, we'll have a young India of 1.6 billion people with a median age of 38. We'll also have the world's largest middle class population. This demographic dividend, combined with the largest middle class, will spur growth and prosperity in India and making it a $30 trillion economy. So clearly, this century belongs to India.
A first-generation entrepreneur who's now India's richest man, a man who thinks he has at least 10 to 15 more years on the runway of life. He's also the India Today magazine Person of the Year. Gautam Adani there in his first ever interview to India Today, and to talk about his selection as the India Today Person of the Year, I'm joined by the India Today Group Publishing Director. We've got Raj Chengappa. Welcome, sir. Congratulations on that big exclusive interview. Also with us is Siddharth Zarabi, Managing Editor of Business Today Television. With me from Kolkata, Saurav Majumdar, Editor of Business Today. And we've got R.N. Bhaskar. R.N. Bhaskar is a senior journalist. He's also written one of the early books on Gautam Adani. So let me start by asking Raj Chengappa to describe what we didn't see in that conversation. The whole setup. Now, Gautam Adani isn't someone who's used to giving frequent interviews, definitely not television sit-down interviews. You managed to do this, so give us some context into what went into setting up this conversation with the Person of the Year and what you picked up from this conversation.
Well, Rahul, you are familiar with Gautam Bhai, as we call him. And I think the real thing was that we have every year, we declare a Newsmaker of the Year. And this year was clearly Gautam Adani. We had Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister, who's done, apart from winning that fantastic election in Gujarat, could have easily become the Newsmaker of the Year, the way he's handled the country during a tough crisis situation. You've had major upheavals across, whether it's Eknath Shinde, breaking ranks from the Shiv Sena and forming a government, Yogi Adityanath winning back-to-back and along with Narendra Modi. You've got to have Rahul Gandhi, who's doing his Bharat Jodo Yatra. You've got a lot of newsmakers, but I think what stood out with it, and that's why we were able to actually then convince him to come on record with a lot of these things, is because this has been a fantastic year for him. I mean, apart from being the third richest person in the world, I mean, the richest Indian overtaking Mukesh Ambani and others, and also the richest Asian, he has had an explosive expansion. If you look at the kind of things that he's done in terms of his market capitalization itself, it's increased ninefold. He bought up Wholesome, which is one of the largest infrastructure deals, possibly the largest infrastructure deal for cement, becoming the second largest cement manufacturer, and he pays something like 85,000 crores. I mean, that's incredible. So the idea was to then ask him, once we had declared that he was the Newsmaker of the Year, for 5 or 6 things. Here, as you mentioned, he's a self-made billionaire. He's a first-generation entrepreneur. A remarkable story. I mean, he's the poster boy of the India story, if you'd like to call it in that sense. And so therefore, when we went to him and talked to him, it was of course very difficult. They were always a little cautious about this. So we did have a long off-the-record chat where we sort of asked him the kind of things that made him comfortable as to what we were really after. And the idea was to understand how did he do it. I mean, this is a remarkable sort of growth that he's shown. There's so much of criticism. He's come under huge flack in Australia for the mines he's had, Indonesia. In India, you had the port in Kerala that has been under trouble. How does he do what he does in this whole criticism that he's been over-leveraged? You know, he's got something debt totaling 2 lakh crores. What is the story behind that? And then the criticism of him being very close to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and therefore,
we'll take it one
you know,
by one.
so I think the idea was to convince him to you know, speak his mind to us, so that we can understand clearly what he is and then represent it in an objective manner.
Siddharth Zarabi, 2022 has been a very special year for Gautam Adani, and he's had many of those. This is where he overtakes Mukesh Ambani, goes out and buys Holcim, gets into cement, gets into media. And this interview, in some senses, from what I know of Gautam Adani, is a big coming out moment for a very reclusive, media-shy person.
Absolutely, and I think it's a clear big win for Raj and India Today and for the group. But very clearly, if 2022 were to be recapped for Gautam Adani and the Adani Group, I would say that the 2 years from now will be even bigger, because some of the big moves that he has made during this period are going to fructify, especially the newer bets that he has made, and therefore the headlines perhaps would be a challenge in 2023, and Raj might be looking at another person of the year when we talk this time of the year next year.
Saurav Majumdar, in the manner in which he's grown his business, and he explains that in the interview, and I remember a conversation with Gautam Adani where he explained this at great length, how his managerial style is such that he claims that there's a lot of delegation to competent professional CEOs. His focus more on project reviews, capital allocation, financial reviews, rather than getting involved, which is why he says he has enough bandwidth to be able to dive headlong into new businesses and also spend time with his family. It's not as if he's engrossed in work 24/7.
Yes, Rahul, that's absolutely right. I think he has enough bandwidth in terms of the managerial capabilities and bench strength that he has. He has his brother, he has his son, he has his nephew. Now these are all people who are now capable and coming out into the front line of the battleground, so to speak. Now the cement play is also now a new one which he has added, and his son is now is managing that. That's already catapulted him to number 2 player, and that's going to play out. You know, I want to stress on one thing, Rahul, that, you know, if you see Gautam Adani's managerial strategic play, it is about betting on India's infrastructure story. He is a firm optimist and believer in the Indian infrastructure story, and that is what you will find as a common theme across all his businesses. And Raj, I'm sure, would have got that detail from him across his businesses, that the common theme is one of capturing the entire value chain, integration across the businesses, and the infrastructure story.
R.N. Bhaskar wrote a book, Gautam Adani, Reimagining Business in India and the World. And in the manner in which you wrote the book and how Gautam Adani's businesses have flourished since, and from what you've gathered from this interview, what are you making of the man, his promise, and what makes him special? What makes him the person of the year versus everybody else who'd like to be Gautam Adani but can't be Gautam
Adani? Well, I can only say 3 things. 1, Gautam Adani is a quintessential trader. A trader thinks short term. Gautam Adani learned how to convert the short term advantage into a long term strategy. Many traders don't make the mark, don't do the transition. Gautam Adani's done that. The second thing that makes him special is that he'll never go public with a company unless he's first started generating profits. He puts his own money, nurtures the company, makes it profitable, and then he goes public. Now that in turn makes investors very happy, and also gives him a valuation which he can use for further propelling his growth. And the third thing, which is remarkable of Gautam Adani, but I have not seen this anywhere in the world, He's a relationship man. And his relationships are so strong that most of his ventures are 50-50 joint ventures. Companies, industrials can't even manage a 26-74 joint venture. And here's a man who's kept a 50-50 venture not only in one, but in several of his businesses. It's as much the partner's business as his business. And yet he retains them. Wilmar has survived 30 years and is one of the most profitable businesses that he's got. And the last thing about Gautam Adani is that he has an abiding faith in one philosophy. When your interests are synergized, are aligned with national interests, growth is easier, growth is sometimes inevitable. Focus on national interests and try to align your business interests with national interests.
Interesting. He's also spoken in this Big India Today interview about his alleged proximity to Prime Minister Modi and whether he benefits from it. He speaks about how he started off, whether it's Keshubai Patel's reign in Gujarat or even before that, when he started making his inroads at the time of the Rajiv Gandhi government. He's talked about the supposed proximity and what it means for him. So let me show you some excerpts and then we'll talk to Raj and our panel about what Gautam Adani said in this Big India Today interview.
Gautam bhai, how would you respond to your critics who say that your rise and your meteoric rise was because of Prime Minister Narendra Modi?
See, Prime Minister Modi and myself, both are coming from state of Gujarat. And that makes me the easy target of such baseless allegations. When I look back at my entrepreneurial journey, I can divide it into 4 phases. Many will be surprised to know that it all began during the tenure of Sri Rajiv Gandhi as the Prime Minister, when he first liberalized the Exim policy, and for the first time, several items were brought in the open general license list. That is what helped me to start my export house. But for Rajiv Gandhi, my journey as an entrepreneur would never have taken off. The second big push I got was in 1991, when the duo of Prime Minister Narsih Rao ji and the Finance Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh ji initiated sweeping economic reforms. Just like many other entrepreneurs, I too was a beneficiary of those reforms. There is no point in further elaborating on it because so much has been said and written about it. The third turning point for me came in 1995 when Keshubai Patel was sworn in as a Gujarat Chief Minister. Until then, all industrial development in Gujarat was only around National Highway 8 from Mumbai to Delhi via cities like Vapi, Ankleshwar, Bharuch, Silvassa, Vadodara, Surat and Ahmedabad. He was a visionary and a focused on a coastal development. And it was that policy change that took me to Mundra and prompted me to build our first port. The rest, as they say, is a history. The fourth turning point was in 2001, when Gujarat witnessed a massive focus on development under Chief Minister Narendra Modi ji. His policies and their implementations went on to not only change the economic landscape of the state, but it also brought social transformations and development of previously underdeveloped areas. It also allowed industries and employment to take off like never before. Today, under his able leadership, we are seeing a similar resurgence at the national and international levels, where a new India is now asserting itself. It is unfortunate that such narratives are being pushed against me. As I explained, these allegations are baseless and suffer from a recency bias, seeing our group success through a short-term lens. The fact of the matter is that my professional success is not because of any individual leader, but because of the policy and institutional reforms initiated by several leaders and governments during a long period of over 3 decades.
So he's answered that question, Raj, in public for the first time. In private, he's often asked the same question, but it's important that he's essentially saying that no matter what dispensation, I grew under Rajiv Gandhi, under Keshubhai Patel, we are from the same state. I do know him well and we're close, but it doesn't mean that my businesses are there because of Narendra Modi or because I'm getting any special favors.
Yeah, I think he wanted to make that absolutely clear. And the way he took his time answering that, you know, talking about his association with Rajiv Gandhi and what really helped. And it was, we also asked him when we were chatting informally about what were the turning points. And in some senses, these coincided with that. When he said that Rajiv Gandhi and the entire reforms process that he brought in allowed him to import material. That started the process of his journey. 1991 comes, Narasimha Rao opens up the economy further, and he starts exporting and sets up Adani Enterprises. Then Keshubhai Patel comes, and he then makes the entire coastal thing, which allows him to finally acquire Mundra port. And then you've been to Mundra as well. You look at that place. I mean, that is transformed from the real back of the beyond.
And imagine when he bought it,
yes,
to have that audacity of appetite,
right,
to buy that massive tract of land. Even at that time, his utilization was just a very small fraction. Even now, they use only 1/3 of the total land available.
And I think what he was trying to say, then comes Mr. Modi and what happens there. But what he was trying to say is, this is the dint of hard work. This is not just because you're chummy with a particular government. He was, spans almost, 8 or 9 governments during this whole period. But it is his hard work that is being pushed, his vision that he wants to do things, and his ability, as Bhaskar, and I read his book, a wonderful book about Adani, how he is able to handle his time and so much, the expansion is clear. When we spoke to him, he was telling me very interestingly that he believes in simplicity in the way. If you come to him and talk to him, he wants it simple, and then he trusts his intuition to do things that he's there. So when you look at the overall thing, the larger message is saying is that, look, at every stage, I went for open tendering. I was the best bidder. It wasn't like someone was favoring me on this thing. Second, I spanned several governments. So there's no single individual or institution that is responsible for where I'm
He
at the moment.
also seems to have, Siddharth, the ability to take bigger bets than anybody else. Everybody else, most other corporate titans, cautious. He seems to think big and act big.
Well, it's very clear that when India's corporate history is written, and if we were to do that now, he is the fastest growing industrial conglomerate that Indian history has seen. Relative to market cap, relative to the number of listed companies, he's added a couple more beyond the ones that he already had. And also in terms of the newer business areas. I would go to say that if you take the entire Adani footprint of businesses, you would see that they will be addressing a market which is perhaps about 600 million in this country and more. It's difficult to even talk about the impact of cement. Pretty much everyone uses it. Look at the media foray. Look at some of the other enterprises that he has. So in terms of the fast-paced growth, I think this is a story without parallel in the Indian context.
Arun Bhaskar, one is of course that he has appetite and gumption to take bigger, bolder bets, just in sheer belief that the India infrastructure story will ultimately catch up. His critics though would say, because he's close to the government of the day, which is why he knows that he'll always have favorable tailwinds, that political stability gives him favorable tailwinds, which is why his ride has been so smooth and not so choppy.
Well, you can say that, but please remember that Gautam Adani would be able to push his ideas through any politician irrespective of party lines. How else do you explain him going to West Bengal and persuading Mamata Banerjee to give him the redevelopment of the Haldia port, or giving him the Tajpur port where he was the highest bidder? And if you look at the Tajpur port or the Haldia port and look at his northeast plan, he is going to be the king of the Northeast in the next few years. Northeast is an unlocked jewel waiting to be tapped. And by creating those linkages, he is taking over the Northeast left, right, center.
Sauram Majumdar, his ability to think big, act big, in comparison to all the other businessmen that you meet and deal with while running business today, because you know, he almost seems, I never had an opportunity to spend time with Dhirubhai Ambani, he was before my time, but of all the people that I have met, he seems to have greater hunger, appetite and desire amongst the Indian business class than most others.
Yes, Rahul, and that's what makes him special, and that's what we are. Why that's the reason why probably he is the person of the year for India Today magazine. The whole point is $150 billion is his bet over the next few years, next decade. Now you imagine this kind of money, this kind of scale. Look at the kind of bets he has taken. He has gone into areas which are high margin. You know, you are looking at various businesses which are giving him also very rapid cash flows. You have airports, you have ports. I mean, these are all big infrastructure plays. He knows that these are the businesses of the future. India is ready for an infrastructure boom. He's betting big time to ride on it, and that's where his shrewdness of strategy. And when you reach a scale of that size, when in various businesses across the board, whether it is FMCG to media to cement, and like I said, the common thread being infrastructure and also the value chain, then you can become bolder and take even bolder bets, because you know you have the cash flows which are coming in on a rapid level.
Okay, so there's always interest in the Adani story. There is heightened interest at this moment because the Adani Group has just completed its takeover of the media brand NDTV. We asked a question about editorial independence. Let's just for a moment listen to Gautam Adani speak about this, and then we'll discuss it amongst our editors.
One of the new acquisitions that you've made is taking over the NDTV group. Now, would you follow the same principle of non-interference that you have demonstrated in your other group companies? And secondly, how would you ensure editorial independence?
See, Raj, on our editorial independence, let me say categorically that NDTV will be a credible, independent, global network with a clear Lakshman Rekha between management and editorial. You can endlessly debate and interpret each and every word of what I am saying, as has been done by many. But my fundamental point is that the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So please allow us some time before you start judging us.
So the last word on editorial independence hasn't yet been spoken, but Gautam Adani says, give us time, judge us by the results, don't have preconceived notions.
Yes, and that's what I also said. We'll do give him time, and several businessmen have bought media houses in the past, and we need not go over the list. And I think it's very important that he made that statement, because there's deep concern about the fact...
Because he'll now be held accountable and judge against that comment.
Absolutely. And I think that was, that was what I think was most important in what he said, that he had come out in public with us to the, to our viewers and everybody else, that he was going to maintain that Lakshman Rekha. And this was, if you recall, the kind of controversies. And very interestingly, when I asked him about these controversies that were there, apart from NDTV, the Australian thing, he was... he said that he accepts that India is a democracy and there will be all kinds of opinion. And he actually was humble enough to say that I learn from criticism. I think that is what, when you look at leaders, what is their ability is to take all that and convert this. And he always says, he's an optimist. When I asked him, about recession, right? And what does he see in 2023? He said, well, things might be bad, but I see, maybe never waste a crisis. And that's his approach on this. So if you look at it, he's very open about whatever he wants to do. He's not cagey about saying it. He speaks frankly, he speaks his mind, and with a great deal of simplicity on this.
And to my mind, R.N. Bhaskar, this is also part of a new effort by Gautam Adani himself and his team around him to try and give the Adani brand a greater public persona. Like Reliance, for example, and we'll speak about Reliance in just a moment, but to try and give it a greater public image, because they feel that they come under a lot of criticism oftentimes for things they do, that good work doesn't get highlighted, and therefore all of this, whether it's the interview, the purchase of a media brand and whatever expansion there may be in this space, really an attempt to try and come out of the shadows, as it were.
Yes, in a way, yeah, you're right. But you must understand, Gautam Adani takes calculated risks. And except for the first diamond trade where he took a rash decision without creating a mitigation strategy, all his moves have a plan B. If this does not work well, what should I do? When Sitwe got too hot for him because of the Australia fight, he just gave up Sitwe for some time. And in Australia, it was a make or break situation. He thought he'd be up and running and profitable in 3 years. It lasted 10 years. 4 governments changed hands, but he did not give it up. At the same time, had constant meetings. Should I keep it? Should I give it up? Should I keep it? Should I give it up? Today, he's got the largest coal mine in the world, 10.5 billion tons of reserves. Compared with his Indonesian mine, 600 million tons. Compare that with India's mines. He's created an energy reserve, an energy security reserve for India should India need more coal, should India need more energy inputs.
Let's now come to the elephant in the room, the unstated but very clear competition between the Adani Group and the Adani Group. Now, when you ever speak to Gautam Adani about it, anyone around him, they'll always try and underplay the element of competition and say that, they're different spaces, there's enough space, the India story is big, it's not as if we're competing. In green energy, they are for the first time in the same sector. Now in media, for example, again they're in the same sector, and as both groups grow, being in the same space is more and more inevitable. In this interview with India today, Gautam Adani talks to Raj Chengappa about being inspired by the late Dhirubhai Ambani. So listen in and then we'll talk a bit about Ambani and Adani.
I know first generation entrepreneurs face difficulties. There is Dhirubhai Ambani that had to do that. You are a first generation entrepreneur. Who is your mentor? Who do you look up to?
Dhirubhai Ambani is a source of inspiration for millions of entrepreneurs in India. He has shown how a humble man, without any backing or resources, and against all odds, can not only set up a world-class business group, but also leave a legacy. Being a first generation entrepreneur and having a humble beginning, I am deeply inspired by him.
So Ambani and Adani or Ambani versus Adani? Siddharth, now anybody within the Adani close circle would always say there's enough space. But you can almost whiff the competition in the air that between these two conglomerates, there is a sense of intense competition, especially with Gautam Bhai now pipping Mukesh Ambani.
Well, tough question. Let me try and answer this through the rise of the equity cult. Many of our viewers would know that Reliance Industries is seen as responsible for taking the equity cult to the masses many decades ago. Take a look at where Adani Group stands today. 7 listed companies, add the cement business, add NDTV, which is also listed, and another 3 to 4 businesses that will get listed, maybe 1 or 2 in 2023 or beyond that. So a dozen odd listed companies clearly puts them at a different pedestal vis-a-vis the Reliance Group. Now there is an element of competition that we will see in the green energy business. But it's absolutely right to serve the needs of the Indian population, to move it away from a coal economy, although I believe coal is not going to go anywhere for at least 10-15 years. India will remain a thermal dependent country. I don't think there's too much to be said. And one last point, Rahul, when it came to telecom, you remember a lot of people went overboard in saying that Adani is entering the telecom space. And you would remember my discussions with you where we said it's going to be a different play, which is the enterprise play. Therefore, I think this bit of going head to head with Reliance is a little overstated. It's not an ego business. If there is a group which has a dozen companies listed, imagine the scrutiny on that group and imagine the amount of quarterly performance and results that you will have to give. I personally think that this is a bit oversaid and overstated.
Okay, you're saying it's overstated, the element of underlying competition. Saurav Majumdar, I remember that cover that you had famously on Business Today about green energy, where you had both Gautam Adani and Mukesh Ambani. He's inspired by Dhirubhai Ambani, who he very clearly, whenever you speak to him about Dhirubhai Ambani, he has stars in his eyes, he talks very fondly, very passionately about Dhirubhai. And the unsaid element is about where this element of competition goes. Is it and, is it versus?
Rahul, I'll give you a very interesting data point which we mentioned in the BT 500 issue of which we put out recently. It's essentially the fact that when Mukesh Ambani took over in 2002, when he came in, and at that time the Reliance Group was the Mukesh Ambani and the Reliance Industries Group was 73 times the market cap of the Adani Group. And today look where they are. Now, you know, whether it's personal wealth or the overall market cap of the two groups. I mean, it's a different story altogether in just a span of between 2002 and now. So, you know, he is of course inspired by Dhirubhai Ambani, and he seems to have got into that growth momentum and following in the footsteps of the person he's inspired by. And
okay, the last piece that I want to focus on is about debt and the charge that the Adani Group is deeply over-leveraged and therefore this is a debt balloon and that this could go kaput if there are unfavorable political headwinds. Gautam Adani answers that question at great length, tries to explain how profits are growing, the debt to EBITDA ratio is actually coming down. So we'll spend a moment showing you what Gautam Adani said, and then we'll try and wrap our head around the numbers.
Let us also look at another concern that has been raised by some of your critics, that the Adani Group is highly over-leveraged. It has a debt of close to 2 lakh crores. What gives you the confidence that you can maintain this debt and repay it?
See, Raj, I must confess that I am greatly surprised by the conversations around our debt. We are financially very strong and secure. Such noises are coming mainly from two categories. The first category is of the people who are not doing deep diving to understand the detailed nuances of debt and finances of company. I'm sure if they make an effort to understand the financial statements, all the misgivings about debt will disappear. However, there is second category of people with a vested interest, deliberately creating confusion and misunderstanding to tarnish the reputation of the group. The fact of the matter is that in the past 9 years, our profit has been growing at twice the rate of our debt, and because of which our debt to EBITDA ratio has come down from 7.6 to 3.2, which is a very, very healthy for a large group where most of the companies are in the infrastructure space with an assured and a predictable cash flow, unlike in a manufacturing. It is for this reason that not only national but international rating agencies have rated us equivalent to India's sovereign rating. It is a matter of great pride for me that no other business group in India has as many companies as the Adani Group, which has sovereign ratings. Raj, you are well aware that rating agencies, and particularly the international ones, are a very conservative and stingy in giving rating, and they have a very, very rigorous and robust systems and processes of a financial analysis. To share with you, it is for this fundamental financial strength of our group that we were able to close the ACC and Ambuja cement deal of $10.5 billion in a record time in less than just 3 months.
He basically says, Siddharth Zarabi, in this interview, that in the last 9 years, our profit has been growing at twice the rate of debt, which is why the debt to EBITDA ratio has actually come down from 7.6 to 3.2, which is healthy for a large group where most of the companies are in the infrastructure space. And the most crucial thing he's saying is that these have predictable cash flows, unlike manufacturing, which are dependent on business cycles.
Again, let's take a look at the business strategy of Gautam Adani, and I would go to the extent of saying that there's a very clear plan. Look at the ports business, for example. Just as one example, it's a very significant play, and the play from where Gautam Adani started his industrial empire. The Adani Group, according to me, believes in market share-led growth. And in many of the businesses that it currently is, it is number one. It does not aspire to be anything else below number one. And when you chase market share in a growing market like India, these are capital-intensive industries, and therefore there will be an element of leverage that you will have. But market share leads to revenues, and that, depending on your style of management and your focus on costs, will lead to profitability. The decline in the leverage that we have seen, and there was a very detailed note that was put out by the Adani Group several months ago, to me seems very clear. Now, what could be worse than COVID? What could be worse than the global slowdown that many people are talking about? But we've seen India as a country and many of our businesses remaining insulated from that. One small point, which is the data business. Again, we don't know what kind of revenue incrementally this industry will provide, but I get a clear sense that the Adani philosophy is not to enter a sector and then build earnings. It is very clearly capture market share, earnings and revenues and profits will follow.
And he also refers to how several of those companies in the Adani Group have equivalent to sovereign ratings, suggesting that they're considered by these rating agencies as being as strong as the ratings of governments, and that he says no group in the country has as many companies which have sovereign ratings as equivalent to sovereign ratings as the Adani Group.
Yeah, and he also punctures the other criticism that is there, which people have accused him of using public sector banks to lend him money, and he says, look, my total exposure has come down from something like 80% now down to around 30% of that. I'm going international and using bonds and others to fund my thing. So in both these things, he has been sensitive to criticism. But if you look at, I think, what Siddharth talked about, he does a couple of things. One, yes, he wants to be the market leader. Two, and as Ed earlier pointed out, I think by Bhaskar, and you said so, the tailwind comes from his integration with the national vision. So he's in step with the government's priorities in that sense. And three, I think his whole approach is that I will not just do solar and generate solar, I will do backward, the upstream and downstream, this thing, I will control everything. So if I went to his solar manufacturing factory at the moment, you see that he wants to manufacture the polysilicon, the ingots, the photovoltaic cells, and he's setting up all the facilities for that. I mean, one of the most modern factories that are coming up there. So his idea is, not only will I set these up, but I will control all the other factors that's there, and that's one of the reasons why he's very confident about the predictability of it. And I think the other thing is his whole business of what he calls incubation. He first builds a company, he never makes it public, if you see his style. It is only after that company reaches a certain stage that he goes for a IPO or something like that and then makes the equity available that's there. So all his companies, therefore, his market capitalization is very strong on that because he has built the fundamentals.
And with predictable cash flows. I think that is the point that he's stressing in the interview, that these aren't companies which are dependent on cycles. These are companies with very, very predictable cash flows because they are in the infrastructure sector. Saurav Majumdar, in some senses, while he's in the private space, he seems to have the appetite of a Chinese state, where they're thinking big, going out and taking audacious gambles of the kind other business groups would be very wary about taking. Go out with belief. A lot of this really, frankly, comes from belief in the India story, belief in the fact that this is going to be the third largest economy in the world, belief in the fact that India's rise is inevitable. Think big. Sooner or later there will be enough demand to take care of all the capacity that you've built.
Absolutely, Rahul. I think if you look at the kind of sectors, and I mentioned this earlier, whether it is airports, look at the kind of air travel numbers we are witnessing. Airports, ports, cement, these are the sectors which are the sectors of the future as India builds out its infrastructure in a massive, aggressive kind of way. And I think whichever government, I think infrastructure in the near future will be the theme, and it will go on. And he's very, very clear that that the cash flows of these businesses will be enough to sort of enable him to have a secure and sustainable growth path. And that is something which he's betting on big time. And that's where the entire strategy of the Adani Group lies.
You know, he just celebrated his 60th birthday, which is also when the Adani Foundation set up a corpus about 60,000 crore rupees to be spent on skilling, healthcare, education, now trying to give back to society. It's a remarkable journey in the shortest possible span of time to become the richest man in Asia, the richest man in India, to be amongst the richest in the world. Gautam Adani, many congratulations on being the India Today Newsmaker of the Year. This is a scoop that Raj has got for the group, a big interview with Gautam Adani. I hope you can read it in the magazine, which is now out on stands. Thank you very much for joining us. Arun Bhaskar, Sarva Majumdar, Siddharth Zarabi, and last but not least, Raj Chengappa. Thank you. Do catch the magazine on the stands. You can also read online and watch the interview on India Today television.